What crazy story do you need to tell? 3 or 4 years ago, I was living in this bigger European city of about 2 million people for some years now. I went with a girl to a pub, and since all tables were full, we sat at the bar. There was an older guy sitting next to me, 50-ish, white hair, smoking a cigar, who kind of distracted me, because he reminded me of my uncle. Now mind, my uncle was living in the US for around 25 years already. He didn't look like that dude, nor did he act too similar. That bar just has some gestures that reminded me of him, mixed with the look of another distant relative. So the girl I was with goes to the toilet. So I can't hold back anymore and look at this dude in the eyes and tell him he reminds me of my uncle. He jokingly asks, "What's his name?" I tell him, and also tell him, well, he lives in the US and works in so-and-so. And then the guy looks stunned and tells me the names of my whole family. Turns out he was the flatmate of my uncle 30 years ago for about half a year. That was definitely one of the weirdest bar stories I experienced. So you thought the guy looked like your uncle, but it just turned out he was your uncle's roommate. I'm not really sure how roommates start to look like each other, but maybe you just have really good intuition. About 19 years ago, 3-year-old me, my mom and my dad come home to find our cat Nubs is missing. The entire family turns the entire apartment upside down, but no trace of our cat is found. My mom decides to make missing flyers, even though all the doors and windows were locked at the time. Days turn into weeks, then into months. She finally comes to terms with the fact that her cat is gone and has disappeared. Cut to last year. My grandma out of the blue says she lost Nubs. She says while we were out shopping, she decided to go to the mall across the street and took my baby stroller to hold extra bags. While she was in the middle of the mall, Nubs, unbeknownst to her, wakes up and jumps out of the bottom mesh pouch under the seat and takes off. My grandma, being too nervous and scared to ask for help, just leaves the store and our cat there. Cue us coming home like half an hour after she gets back home. She helped us look for this cat too. It makes me hysterically emotional to think about what happened to my mom's favorite cat. This is the story of how our cat just one day, out of the blue, vanished into thin air. Now we finally have the answer. Yeah, never take your cat to the mall because they'll just never want to leave. How I met my significant other. On a plane, flying Bangkok to Doha, I was downgraded when my better seat upgrade fell through. I got sat in the third to last row. Hit it off with the Spanish girl next to me. 3 weeks later, on a whim, I flew from the States to Spain to meet her. 3 weeks after that, I moved there. Just hit our 2-year anniversary and are celebrating the birth of our first child. Well, sure, that seems unlikely, but it's probably still more likely than meeting a significant other on online dating. This is a long story from the early 1980s that has Kentucky justice in it. My family lived just outside of Cincinnati on the Kentucky side of the Ohio River. My father's older brother lived there as well and was a father to 4 daughters. One of his daughters, at the age of 18 or so, was dating a guy who was a little older than her, who convinced her to move down south with him. My uncle approved, and his daughter headed south with her boyfriend into a Kentucky holler that his extended family lived in. Time passed, and my uncle hadn't heard from his daughter in a while, and he started to grow concerned. My cousin called my uncle in distress from a payphone at a grocery store, saying she was being mistreated by her boyfriend's family, and being held hostage and worked like a slave. Before my uncle could learn more, the phone was cut off. At this point in the story, it's important to know my uncle was an avid hunter and gun collector. He explained to my wife and other daughters the situation. He packed up his Oldsmobile Delta 88 with his favorite guns and headed down to the holler his daughter's boyfriend was from. He was going down in hillbilly country, where there were no street names, just dirt roads and family farms. By the time he finally found their farmhouse, it was night. The boyfriend's family was on the porch, shooting shotguns off into the air, fully expecting to scare my uncle away. My uncle stopped his car 50 yards from the house and popped the trunk. He methodically lined up his rifle on the hood of the car facing the house, tooling up like Arnold in Commando on the beach. My uncle was an extremely large man, who was well known for having an explosive temper. Completely unfazed, he shouted up to the hillbillies, "If my daughter doesn't come down in 5 minutes, I'm gonna come up there and kill every man, woman, and child I see." The boyfriend and his brother ran back inside the house, and not even 1 minute later, my cousin came running out of the house with her single suitcase. Okay, so is this just an alternate prequel to the movie Taken? I suppose that little hillbilly compound is a little bit easier to take down than some international sex trafficking mafia. I was served lunch sometime during a flight. While eating, I noticed the woman sitting next to me was slowing down in her movements. Slower cutting, slower chewing. Suddenly she stops completely in her movements, fork and knife in hands, half-cut food on her plate, face bowed forward above her plate, and nothing else. I touched her on the shoulder, pushed a little bit, asked her if everything was okay, and no reaction. Couldn't really tell if she was still alive. Was it the air conditioner or her breath? No idea. I didn't want to panic and frighten anyone else. You know, dead person. Made eye contact with the stewardess, point towards next to me. A couple minutes later, 5 stewardesses, including a co-pilot, form a barrier around our seats, and like a movie, tried to get a reaction, aka, "Don't you die on me." The woman wakes up, looks up and says just this one sentence, "I took really strong sleeping pills," and goes back to sleep in the same Tyrannosaurus posture. As if this has happened before, and she had anticipated this conversation. As if she knew that her mind would only be awakened long enough for one sentence. So for the entire remaining 6 to 7 hour flight, there is this lady next to me, mimicking a Tyrannosaurus, her hands still grabbing the now removed fork and knife, drooling on the table, and everyone passing by giving me this questioning look. Best flight ever. So I haven't really explored this that deeply, but I feel like we kind of have sort of a backup brain. You know, there's obviously your normal conscience where you are looking around and talking and taking everything in. But then you also have your subconscious, which is just always thinking about things when you're not really even paying attention to it. And so there are actually some times where, like, you know, you stand up too fast and you black out and you know, you're just losing all sense of everything. Well, in moments like that, rather than just, you know, passing out and falling over, it's almost like my backup brain kind of kicks into gear and is just like, okay, stand still, take one step, take another step, and then I just sort of wait it out like that. I wonder if these things are related at all. This was summer between junior and senior year in college. So this one time I show up to a guy's parents' house to pick up a mutual friend. Turns out the guy who dealt weed to all of us was there too, and they were all stoned off their butts. Parents are nowhere to be found, but the house reeks of pot smoke. I had an internship that drug tested, so despite how much I wanted to smoke, I couldn't. As the only sober person there, I'm trying to convince my friend to leave with me so we won't get into trouble. As we were getting close to leaving, the host's dog starts going nuts by the front hall bathroom. The dealer investigates and turns to inform us that there is in fact a possum in the bathroom. We all call BS, but as each person checks, there is sure enough a possum in the bathroom. The dealer comes up with the idea to use a broom to sweep the possum into the dog kennel. They were successful in this venture. Then came the inevitable question of now what? The obvious answer? They hotboxed a wild possum in the front hallway. I got my friend out shortly after. Less than a quarter hour later, the parents showed up to a stoned caged possum in their front hallway, surrounded by stoned 18 to 20-year-olds and their stoned son. They never did believe that the possum got in on its own, probably through the doggy door. My friend and I got away squeaky clean. You know, I haven't run into any possums, but speaking of random animals getting into your house. So pretty recently, me and Faye got woken up in the middle of the night to the sound of a neighbor cat having a battle with a raccoon just right outside this window. It was very loud and also very terrifying. I had no idea what the sound was until like an hour later when I shined a flashlight out the window and see this fuzzy little head poking out of the hole in the wall, which I had to go seal up the next day. I didn't have a car when I was at uni, which made going out with my friends a bit bothersome. I would constantly stumble home half drunk in the middle of the night or early morning, wait for the first train to leave, and so on. One day I was visiting friends, and the only way back home that late, at around 1 or 2 in the morning, was a train which followed some godforsaken country route. My stop lay next to a small wood and a castle. Think 13th century Central European castle. I knew the way because I have played there a lot when I was a kid. You have to follow a trail through some fields, past the stables where horses are kept, through a wooded patch that dips into a slope, past the woods around the castle, then along a narrow road between 2 fields, past an abandoned gatekeeper's house that looks like a set straight out of a horror movie, until you reach a bridge where you need to pass underneath to rejoin civilization. There are no lights anywhere. I was still a bit drunk, and I considered just waiting for the next bus, but that would have been hours. It was summer, the weather was nice, and I thought, well, I know this path by heart, easy peasy. So I started walking. Everything was fine until I reached the slope. As soon as the terrain dipped, there was zero light. On my left were the woods, completely black. On my right, a hill covered in underbrush completely blocked the moon. I couldn't even see my own feet. There I was, shuffling forward like a complete idiot, only one stray branch away from breaking my ankle. It took me forever to reach the end of the slope. Now, you can imagine what it felt like to stumble in utter darkness in the woods at night. Every sound made me think I was about to get murdered at any moment. It was actually the thought of a former teacher of mine that kept me from panicking. He said that the forest is pretty much the safest place to be at night, because what kind of inept would-be killer would wait for a victim in the middle of nowhere? We'd be more likely to get mugged in a dark alley near the city center. So I tried to be rational. Eventually the moon reappeared, and I was at least able to see a bit better. I was just walking towards the abandoned house, congratulating myself on my bravery, which, I kid you not, someone jumps out of the woods to my right into my path. It was so quick, I wasn't even able to scream. A friggin' jogger in full gear, in the middle of the night, in the woods, without light. He just ran along the road ahead of me as if he had night vision or something. Anyway, I got home unmurdered, swore I'd never do something like that again, and did the exact same thing a week later. I honestly wonder how I made it past 30. Back when I was 17, I would sometimes go on these really long 10-mile walks at night in the dark down these really isolated highways. So I can kind of relate to this. It's actually such a wild experience when you're walking down this dark road, it's just completely black everywhere, and then you see a car coming at you. I mean, there's no sidewalk, you're just like in the shoulder, and it gets brighter and brighter and louder, and then when they pass you, it just instantly goes silent and dark again. And those people all probably had a heart attack after almost running over a teenager in the middle of the night. I've never stolen a cat. I'm actually allergic to cats, so I can't even have a cat. Despite this, I've been accused of stealing 3 separate cats on 3 separate occasions by 3 different people. One guy threatened to shoot me for stealing his cat, but I didn't steal his cat. Now that was a wild Thanksgiving. Yeah, over the past year especially, I've learned that cats don't have a ton of allegiance to anybody. Because all of my neighbors' cats seem to enjoy my yard more than their own, and so Faye's just getting into fights just constantly. While playing video games, I met this guy who I found pretty charming. He added me as a friend, and for the next few weeks we would play late into the night, chatting on Discord, cracking jokes, and generally getting along great. We talk about our lives and how I'm in college and he's in HVAC training. He eventually asked me to be his girlfriend, but since he lived on the East Coast and I'm on the West, we maintained a blissful long-distance relationship, playing games and sending nudes. While we're chatting one night, out of nowhere, he drops it on me that he's 16 years old. At the time, I'm 18, so it's not illegal or anything. But had I known in the first place, I likely wouldn't have agreed to date him. However, I stayed in the relationship. From what he told me, his home situation wasn't that great. He had divorced parents who were somewhat both strict and neglectful. He starts talking about how he wants to run away and come live with me and start a new life without a shred of doubt. I blindly follow this 16-year-old I've been dating for 2 months. I spent all my birthday money on a plane ticket for him. He plans to have a coworker sneak him to the airport late in the night. We planned for him to live in my 15 by 15 dorm with me. Somehow, we managed to get him on a plane from Pennsylvania to Oregon. While he's on the flight, I get a call from a police officer from Pennsylvania, who informs me it's a felony to transport a minor across state lines without parents' consent. I freak. I narc on him real hard. The second the plane lands in Oregon, he gets escorted off the plane by the police and sent to juvenile detention until his parents can fly out and come get him. That's how I kidnapped my underage boyfriend. Hindsight is 20/20, right? Well, I almost have to hand it to him. Being 16 years old, already with a job, and trying to move in with a girlfriend, he sure is trying to get a head start on life. But anyway, I guess that'll do it for part 2 of just bizarre random stories. It's always really hard to come up with a title and thumbnail for videos like this, because they don't really have any clear direction. But anyways, I'll see you guys next time.